Hey friends, Jen here. Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to Homes That Heal. So first, I just want to share a quick announcement with you. Today's show is going to be the last guest show for about a month or so. For the whole month of March, you'll get Jen solo or Ask Jen episodes instead of having guest shows. I know that's a lot of Jen, but I promise you they'll be jam-packed with goodness. The reason for this shift is honestly, I'm going to take a page out of my own playbook and take a bit of a spring break hiatus to recharge my batteries, take a little time off, and basically just overall recalibrate a bit. I've been going full throttle all winter long with sauna season, plus a ton of great shows, and my mind and body are telling me they need a break. So there'll be solo shows around a few hot topics that I'm getting a lot of questions about. Some sauna, some not. Plus, I'll deep dive into some specific products from the Jen Recommends pages on my site. I'll also share some changes you can make in your home to eliminate toxicity to create more wellness and ease in your daily life. If you're eager and want to get started, feel free to jump over to my site, jenhellerlifestyle.com, and download your free home checklist today. It'll be the roadmap for what we chat about next month. Okay, so let's talk about my guest today, Zach Rehder. Zach is not only an amazing soul, he's also a gifted and sought-after international teacher, speaker, and healer with decades of experience in meditation, breathwork, and energy healing. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you meet him. His energy is super grounded, and I could honestly listen to him all day. A bit about Zach. He'll share his story too, but in short, through a series of profound awakenings, he has become a channel for transformative teachings and energies that heal, unlock, and awaken human potential. His work empowers individuals to dissolve barriers and free themselves from negativity, limitations, and lack, truly creating a space for healing and personal transformation. Zach travels the world to lead workshops and seminars, plus he offers online programs and private sessions. His mission is to support others in their awakening process, and through his compassionate guidance, he empowers people to access their own divine wisdom with ease, clarity, and grace. Zach and I were originally connected through his search of a sauna, no surprise. But after chatting further, it was obvious we needed to be friends. He's a healer, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and know you will too. So without further ado, please welcome Zach Rehder to the show. Are you struggling with low energy, weight gain, hormonal imbalances, or heavy metal and mold toxicity? Do you want to learn more about anti-aging tips and creating more longevity in your life? Well, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Jen Heller, a wellness educator, infrared sauna expert, and home health consultant. In this podcast, Homes That Heal, I will teach you how to transform your home into a health and wellness sanctuary. Your health is your wealth, and I believe that your home should be your sanctuary space, loaded with the tools you need to thrive in your life, not just survive. If you want to feel fantastic and transform your life and home, grab a pen, let's dive in and create a home that heals. Okay, friends, welcome back to another show of Homes That Heal. Today, we are joined by my friend Zach. He is going to chat with us a bit about energy work and healing. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, thank you for joining me. I have to just say right out of the gate before we get into things, you've got an event going on either today or tomorrow. Is that correct?
I start a retreat tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. So I want to make sure we dive into that. But first, I want to just share, we met last year, or it got connected last year. You reached out to me about a sauna, which we'll get into a little bit shortly. But tell me a little bit about your story. You have a fascinating and interesting path, and I would love to hear just how you found energy work, or did it find you? Tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah. I grew up in martial arts, and there were obviously there's some energy play in there, Qigong and Tai Chi. One of the things that I really started to notice is how much of a feeler that I was. I could feel someone would be talking about something and I would feel it in my own body. I would feel where the stuckness was in their system. And then that just became a path of exploration. And it started, I didn't have any training necessarily in energy healing. It was just hey, can I try something? And results started happening. And then it just was kind of following the breadcrumbs where everything is energy. I always tell people energy likes to move. And so it's where the places in our bodies where it's been stuck or stagnant or held for a long time, it gets cranky. It manifests as tension or inflammation or disease.
Yeah.
And so So many of the things that I do is just like to get things back flowing again. Just like water. If when water is flowing, it's alive, it's brilliant. It's like if you stop water for too long, it starts to smell and grow stuff. We've done that in our bodies. And so it's like getting that flow going and getting that back moving again. It's like our bodies know how to heal themselves.
Yeah, beautiful. A friend of mine once told me an analogy about water. She said, imagine yourself in a canoe or in a kayak, whatever, or on a raft, and you're just in the river. And our life brings us challenges where we can maybe bump up against the embankment, or sometimes the waters are a little bit more bumpy or a little bit more wild, but the river flow is going. And sometimes it's good to have a season of just relaxation and coasting, like you're on the lazy river. And then there's other times where it's like, let's go, let's implement, or let's do some things. But when we get stuck on the embankment, that's where things don't feel good, or to your point, get a little stagnant and not kind of gross. I've used that analogy in my head ever since I learned that, because in business decisions or in life decisions, it's like, am I stuck on the side of the river right now? What's going on? We've got to kind of keep that energy flowing. So I love that. I'm just curious if I remember right. You've been in this work for decades, correct? Like, when did you first learn about this? This is way before energy work was cool, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, by about 18, I knew that there was something out there, but I wasn't going for anything that anybody else was saying. So I became just a really hardcore seeker and explorer. And I think I've tried just about everything that I've come across to explore. And then lots of great things that were the perfect thing at the time, the step to the next thing. But I think meditation and breath practices, those are the two that have just stood the test of the time, and they keep delivering, they keep providing the results. So
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I know that those are your expertise in your wheelhouse. So give me an example maybe of like an obstacle. There are different things. Like I love breath work. I discovered breath work. Actually, breath work discovered me years ago when I actually had to use my own breath to save my life, so to speak. And then it became like our body actually has the ability to walk us through some pretty deep challenges. So I'm curious if you can share, describe, like, what would you say are some of your biggest obstacles or challenges that you have found that breath work or meditation have helped? Obviously, I know you teach this. So any of your experiences?
yeah, what were the biggest ones? I mean, I can think of many, many obstacles. And I think of the obstacles, I think of like, here's the opportunity where I found myself out of alignment in some way with who I really am. And so this obstacle that's maybe hitting me in the face, or maybe
Yeah.
however it's showing up, it's here to serve me. I know that if I really get to know it and get to meet it, and if I can open up in this obstacle, it's going to bring me more me. So I always invite my clients, it's like, hey, what if everything that you've been looking for was found in the things that you didn't want to look at?
Yeah, that's lessons, right? Yeah, obstacle is probably not the correct word, actually, since once you started talking, it's like, you know what, obstacle is actually more like challenge or opportunity. I think that we can all resonate with things that didn't feel so good in the moment. But then when you look back, I mean, 2024 was an interesting year for myself in business, and some things that I thought I had a clear path on. All of a sudden, something comes in, it's like, whoa, did not see that coming. Instead of life is happening for me, not to me, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? So I like that that's how you see that as well.
One of the biggest obstacles, or I could say like one of the biggest teachers, was finances and money for so long in my life. And it was always like trying to outrun it, or like always trying to, trying to hustle or create or get away from it. And it was actually, I had this experience where things in my life started going really well. I was getting to travel the world and my work was taking off, and then I had more money than I'd ever had before, which was great. And then through a combination of spending and taxes and just being reckless, I guess, it was like it started getting tight again. It came with this knowing of these feelings that are coming up. These have always been here, because I wanted to just, okay, let me make something, let me create, let me do something to make money to get myself to a comfortable place, because the way that it looks right now is not comfortable. And I realized it was like, oh my gosh, I've always been running from these uncomfortable feelings, whether we call them lack or scarcity or not enough. And it was like, I was designing my whole life around doing anything I could to dodge them, to outrun them, to stuff them down for another month or two or whatever.
Yeah.
And it really came to this place. It was like, this is what I need to meet. Can I just sit down in all of these feelings of scarcity and lack and not do anything with them? Can I find some breath in them? Can I relax and open my body in them? And then realizing it's like, I've never done that before. We could say it's like making friends with the feelings that I was running from. And it was amazing. It was just like that process opened up abundance. It wasn't something that I had to do. It was like all of these things started flowing again. And so I got to see how most of my ego's desires were actually rooted in this place that is fight of resistance. It's like, I want to have the relationship so that I don't have to feel lonely, or I want to have the money so I don't have to feel this. It was always rooted in these things that I was running from or avoiding. And then the magic became like, wait a minute, these are just feelings. They actually never, never been hurt by a feeling. And they've been very misunderstood too.
Yeah. I've never heard anybody describe it like that. If you're probably looking at my face, I have got this look on my face like, and money is an interesting topic, right? It's an interesting energy. And
Yeah.
you obviously work with people specifically in and around topics. Would you say that money and finance, loneliness, finance, like those are the hot topics, right? And I can relate to that. I mean, I'm in a place now where I don't even like to say the word hustle. In fact, my husband called me out the other day because I said the word hustle and grind. He's like, we don't say hustle. We don't hustle in this house. You know, there's being and there's doing. I think there's a pretty seismic shift, though, happening. Would you
Yeah.
agree that people are like,
Yeah. Where hustle used to work before, it doesn't even work anymore.
it doesn't. I think the resistance, even saying the word is like, ugh, you know, and I'm a multitasker. My personality, my happy place is in being connected and doing a lot of things. I love being connected to people. I love going to the retreats. Like I was on your website last night. I was like, oh, interesting. You know, I knew you did the retreats, but I was like, could I get to Sedona by tomorrow? I don't think so. So I like to do a lot of things, but it's more so for me, it's like pouring into myself. It really doesn't have anything to do with work, if you will.
Yeah.
It's more about nurturing. And sometimes I can get caught up in doing too many of those things. But the hustle of work and trying to show up for other people, I feel like that's down the river. Would you agree? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and that can be for money. That can be for because we were trying to be valuable. We're trying to get some appreciation that we feel
Mhm.
like we're lacking. And so one of the ways to play, like if you stopped creating today, if you're just like taking 3 months off, what are your finances going to do? And just notice what you feel.
Yeah. I actually took time off. I did take a whole, well, actually, yeah, it was kind of like 3 months last year, maybe four. My husband was like, what are you doing? I actually did that. I mean, I didn't do nothing, but I completely kicked the can of my normal work routine because I had been doing it for years. As I said earlier, some things presented themselves to me last year that I wasn't anticipating. And so I kind of just threw my hands up, grounded down, and just started asking God, my source, higher power, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Show me where to go. What am I supposed to do? Because the grandiose plan I had in my mind, you just threw the map out. Like I
Yeah.
had the map. And so now it's like hands off the wheel, show me where to go. And a bit of that was in some discovery and taking literally time off of work and the doing of the things that I normally do, which is sell saunas and a lot of other stuff. Obviously, I was doing the podcast. I mean, I did a lot of the shows and I just poured into conversations, but I did take some time off and it felt weird, felt very weird because we're used to doing and going. But by month two, I was like, this is exciting. This feels good. My body needed this rest. I needed this restoration time. So, have you ever taken like a complete, I don't say hiatus, but have you ever experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I just came off of 6 to 8 weeks of very slow time, did lots of cleansing. So I spent a month like doing cleanses and
Nice.
hanging out at home near the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, you know, nothing wrong with that. Purging the body. I think a lot of people can relate that that feels pretty good. Winter months for me are go time and sauna season. So once October, November hits, everybody's got this mindset. It's winter months, it's holiday, it's go time. So I'm kind of coasting off of this right now, being the month of February. I'm like, ah, I can breathe a little bit now. But speaking of saunas, you obviously have a sauna in your home.
I love my sauna. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the day in the life of Zach. How do you use your sauna?
I mean,
What is that whole routine look? I'm dying to know what your daily routine is.
I have a kind of ridiculous morning routine when I'm home. So get up and meditate, sauna. Yeah, I let myself cool down from the sauna and then I'll like go get a cold plunge in at some point. Smoothies, get some exercise. It's like a 4 hour leisurely morning.
Isn't that great
Um,
though?
It's amazing for the last very long period of time. I've also been on the road a lot, doing lots of events on the road. And that became really clear to me this last year that it was also time to wind some of that down and to be home
Mm.
more. And my home keeps getting more amazing to be at with all my toys. So
I know that's, I mean, obviously the show Homes That Heal, that's really what all I ever want to talk about. Our home, I always say, is kind of we call it Hell or Haven. It's kind of like a wellness fortress, but I love to travel. I enjoy traveling and going and experiencing, but I'll tell you, my husband Mark and I were just chatting about this last weekend. We love being home. We've created this sanctuary space of all the things that we love, things that we enjoy. We can spend hours like on the weekends when we don't have things to do. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I can chamber and I can sauna and I can cold plunge and I can walk and I can meditate, I can do my brain tap. Like I just have a whole day of just restore and it feels fantastic. You don't have to go anywhere. So it sounds like you've created the same for
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. It was many years ago, this question that I would just kind of follow and ask myself of like, I wonder how good I can feel today. What would that look like? And then what would be the next step into like maybe opening up the possibility to feel even better? That's been a fun question to live and explore. And obviously every day is different. And some days are really good and some days are a little better than yeah.
Others.
Yeah.
What would you say? How did you, so just to dip back into saunas, because obviously that's my wheelhouse and I love that. How did you come across infrared heat? And I'm also curious, you've had your sauna for almost a year. I think we're coming up on a year. What would you say have been your biggest takeaways from her? How has it helped you specifically? Anything noticeable? Or I can't remember what we talked about when we first chatted about it, but was there something specific you bought it for?
I love the detox aspect of it, just the environment that we live in. We all need to be better and better at staying clean. And so that was probably the number one reason. It's funny when I'm usually doing a bunch of different things. So it's like hard to tell what's the thing that's really working and making it better. But I know the sauna is one of I try not to miss it, especially when I was home for a couple months. I think I was in it every single day.
That's the best. People ask me all the time. They assume that I do my sauna every day. I wish that I could say that I do because that would be glorious. I go in probably 3 or 4 times a year. In fact, I'm going to probably kick it off. I was wanting to do in February, but here we are to do it every day for like 30 days. Just get super diligent. I would say twice a year, sometimes 3 times, like for 30 days, sauna, cold plunge, and just be super regimented for that period of time. And why a person wouldn't just live in that gloriness for 365, I don't know. It's just the schedule that the realities of travel and whatnot. But there's a significant difference when you are consistent with those behaviors and consistent with that. Even the meditation, I'm doing a visualization right now, a 30-day visualization meditation with a group of ladies where we focus in the morning for like 2, 3 minutes and just listen to a specific visualization. We're all listening to the same thing. And then you journal and you write. Day 3, I'm just like, oh, it just completely unlocks something in our energy system. So I'm going to turn it over to you because this is obviously your wheelhouse, but tell me a little bit about what you teach or walk me through some of your programs or somebody who wants to work with you.
Yeah, I think the most important piece is our relationship, just like our relationship with the breath. I always tell people like presence heals everything. And so it's the things in our life, say it was a trapped trauma or emotion that's been stuck in our body for a long time that manifests into some condition. It's like it got separated. It's like this energy kind of got separated and stuck. And so it's like to actually, again, be with it, to let it be one with us again. It's like it gets to heal, it gets to be healthy. And so that very much shows up. I tell people my 2 favorite tools are breathing and feeling. And because those are both presence practices. You can't breathe yesterday and you can't feel tomorrow.
Mm.
And so those are really profound. And so you'll watch, I mean, if you watch people, like people hold their breath thousands of times a day and they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
When someone goes off in a thought, right, they're worried about next week, it shows up in their body as tension. It shows up in their breath as either shallow or held or disconnected. And so the simplest free practice that you can do is to really start being with your breath more often. I'll bring in another finance example. It was one thing that I noticed. This was back in the day when I used to pay all my bills with checks. Well, one day I just caught myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm holding my breath the whole time. I'm just so tense. So it's like, I'm living in this story right now that I'm writing numbers on this piece of paper and now I have less, or now I'm less than for some reason. I realized it's like, wow, I'm not present at all when I'm paying bills. And so that became my new meditation practice of like, okay, what if the most important thing is to be with my breath the whole time? Like, how open can I stay while I go through this? life just starts changing. Things show up in our lives in different ways as we're working through these things.
That is fascinating to me. You're so right. Holding your breath and the money piece of things, I think a lot of people struggle with. But even just when you were saying that, I caught myself like holding my breath and the tension is like, oh my gosh, he's so right about that. How interesting. That is such an interesting component. What would you say to coin off of that? If people were to take away some like actionable steps from listening to us talk today, what are common, I don't want to say obstacles, but what are some takeaways or just some simple practices that people could become more aware and utilize something like this?
Yeah, one of my favorite breath practices, I just call it lower, slower, deeper, softer. Just really breathing through your nose, as low, as slow, and as deep and as soft as you can. And if you do it for a while, you can work yourself to you're breathing one breath a minute, and it's always moving the whole time. Nobody can start there. As you slow that down more, it's like we're starting to stack ourselves, like having more times of presence during our day. And those start to build and build and build. And, eventually we get to a tipping point where all of a sudden it's like I'm spending more of my day in presence than off someplace else, than in worry or any of these other things. And so how do we know what's a great opportunity is like anything that triggers us. That's something like, hey, can I spend some time with that feeling? And so I always give everyone this question, what if this doesn't mean what I think it means? Because if we have trapped and stored information in our systems, it's like none of us want to be trapped. It doesn't either. And so it's always trying to come up. We've seen the example, like always, nobody is that mad that somebody switched lanes in front of them, but somebody switched lanes in front of them and it triggered a whole bunch of stuff that was maybe stuck or held in that system. And so our mind has to make everything mean something. And it's doing this all of the time. It's like our mind is very uncomfortable with an unanswered question. And so it makes up answers all of the time. Just all day long, it's just making up stuff. And we realize like most of it's not true. And so instead of someone cuts me off and I'm like, everything that I'm feeling is about that guy switching lanes. And it's like, well, yeah, what if that's not what this is? And if I can kind of set aside the idea or the story of what I think is going on right now and actually just spend some time breathing and feeling and really being present with what's going on in my system, that's where we just continue to like heal and process that information. You do that enough times and then it's like, no one's going to make you angry. Someone cuts you off and you're like, that was a good move.
Right.
I've done that before.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the car and the cutting off analogy. My husband, Mark, and I talk about this all the time. And I would say that that was road rage or road anger is a thing. But once you're aware of it and you are feeling into it, it's like, again, no one's ever really explained it to me in the calm, peaceful way that you just explained it to me. But I drive differently now than I did 5, 10 years ago. I was a more aggressive driver because I thought it's a lot of things, right? We think we need to be somewhere, we're running late or whatever. It's like, no, take a step back, take a breather, get in the right lane, let people go. You have no idea why they're in a hurry. I would imagine for some people, there is maybe some urgency why they're trying to get somewhere that they need to be, or maybe there's an emergency, but we live on a busy interstate and my husband used to drive 40 minutes to work every day. And most of the time he'd come home at the end of the day and he'd be like ranting about some guy who did this and did that. And over the course of a few months, I would just smile at him and say, what's really going on here? So that was a few years ago. So now we talk about how he's a much more peaceful driver, doesn't get angry, just allows people to just kind of free float, just lets them go. People honk the horn at you. It's like, okay, no problem. Breathe into that. Just let them go. It's just such a different and more peaceful way to go about your life. And I work from home now and have for the last few years. So I don't want to say I rarely go anywhere, but I don't drive as many places and Mark works from home as well, which is part of the peacefulness of our life. But out on the highways, it's interesting how you can go inward with yourself and check yourself. So that's an interesting analogy. Thank you for sharing that.
Our culture has such an unhealthy relationship with anger. And so I think one of the worst things that we were taught is that there's such a thing as negative emotions. It's not negative. That's our mind casting a story on it. They're all important. They wouldn't be a part of us if they weren't meant to be here. But there's this really so I watch like energetically in people's systems. It's like when they think they're dealing with a negative emotion, again, that's getting processed through the system that thinks that it's bad, that it shouldn't be here. And so they're not receiving the emotion. It's like they're fighting against it. They're trying to stuff it somewhere. And so like anger or whatever, it gets stuffed and held. And parts of the body of how people deal with it. Whereas if you just let it move, I love this term that I came up with called spaciously pissed. Again, it's like anger is a normal, natural thing. It's the appropriate response to a lot of the things that we see in the world. And where people have this negative connotation with it, it's like they're squeezing on it. They're trying to control it. And so you watch people get very tense when they're angry. And then we see the volcanoes, we see the ways that anger blows up. And it's like anger didn't do that. That's suppressing anger for a very long time. And then it finally found a crack that got out.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's like anger has never hurt anybody. It's actually really healthy. And it's like as we learn to find our breath in it, because usually people get shallow and held and tense, it's to actually allow it to be here and let it move. It's a totally different experience.
Spaciously pissed. I think I'm going to use that.
Yeah, it's just fun words.
I was going to say that really, it is fun, but it also kind of paints a picture, right? It gives you a little bit of an idea of what that looks and feels like. Yeah, I would say it's not a secret, I talk about it a lot, but I really dove into energy work and meditation and breathing a few years before my dad passed, but then shortly after he passed, because my dad and I didn't have a good relationship for 35 years of my life. Like when I was a kid, I'm sure we had fun, but I've always been kind of the free-spirited, climbing trees when I was 3, creating things. My mom was always very gracious to kind of just let me be and create and do things. My dad was a bit of a controller. Like he wanted me to fit into this little box. For me to be creative was misbehaving, I guess some would see it. So my dad was constantly trying to control me. And I just resisted that. Like the more he was like, Jennifer, don't do that. I was like, watch me. I'm going to go do this. So as that built over teenage years, I moved out of my parents' home when I was like the minute I turned 17. I graduated high school early. I was like, adios, amigos. I was angry and I was frustrated that my dad spent a lot of my life trying to control things that weren't really reckless. It was just, I think, out of a bit of control. Like he just wanted to be the person in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't love that. I didn't love that at all. And so in my 20s, we had a lot of tumultuous arguments and we went for a stint of not even speaking to each other for a few years. Like it was pretty bad. And then a health issue came up for him and I wrestled with it for a few years. And I just decided I'm going to have regret if something happens and I don't do or say or feel through some of these things, or at least level the field. I didn't have any idea if he was going to meet me halfway or if he was going to meet me where I was at, or if he was even going to be open to even hearing what I had to say. But something came over me where I was like, I felt this trapped anger in me that was, to your point, like ready to blow. And I would maybe get angry with somebody else when it really had nothing to do with them. But it was really all this pent up anger for decades. Mm-hmm. And so long story short, I started sharing some of these things with him. His health, he had an aneurysm on his heart and it was serious. And so I just said, listen, I don't want something bad to happen to you or something to happen to either one of us. And I have regrets. I want to say some things. I want us to have a good relationship. We're adults. Like, why can't we do this? And fortunately, he agreed. He brought the wall down and we were able to work through some stuff. But it was in that experience that I felt like I could finally take some deep breaths, particularly when I would go and visit him. They didn't feel tense anymore. And it was like, whoa, there's something to this trapped energy that's been living with me for literally over 30 years, my whole life probably, but I didn't really recognize it, to put a label on it, so to speak, until I was a teenager, but 25, 30 years. And it was like a flood, in fact, goosebumps right now in my body, a flood of emotions and a flood of stress instantly gone when I started working through literally just breathing through some of those conversations. And then when we weren't together, I was tapping into, to your point, I started feeling like this is going, like this is releasing and moving out of the body. I'm going to do more of this. And I started doing more inner work just on myself and not really sharing it with anybody. I shared a little bit with my husband or whatever, but I just dove headfirst into energy work and breath work because I could feel the release, like the valve was off once I started even dipping my toes in that. And I wasn't expecting that because I didn't realize how much I was carrying until I started letting it go. And then I could feel the resistance literally moving through my body and moving out. And so then then I got kind of obsessed, actually, to be honest. And I'm sure you can relate where it's like, this is incredible. This is incredible work, and people need to know this exists. I've known of breath work and energy work and meditation for the better part of my whole life, but it wasn't until the experience with my dad in the trapped energy that I felt and then release out that I actually spent some more intentional time in it.
Yeah, I think that's the process that probably everyone is in. I always joke around, if the last 7 generations of your family, if they were not emotional masters, then you inherited a bunch of stuck and stored and trapped energies and emotions and belief systems. And so we're kind of the first generations that actually have the time and the space. Like, actually, for a long time, most of the world, they were just worried about surviving. Right. They're not meditating. They're not necessarily doing their work, but trying to keep a roof over their head or whatever. And
Right.
so there is this incredible, it's like the beautiful times that we have. It's like where we do have some of the time and the resources to sit down and feel, or go to a retreat, or do some breath work, or meditate every day, like whatever those are. And it's move these old things.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause one of the places that people get stuck in emotion a lot is the assumption that because I feel it in my body, that it's mine. It's just emotion. But as soon as I've turned it into mine, I almost feel we grab it in a certain way. Like, this is my anger.
Mm-hmm.
And what if anger doesn't belong to anybody? What if it's not something that you can own or hold on to? It's like, I'm experiencing it, right? It's like, I'm in it, I'm aware of it, I'm fully in this anger experience. But what if it's not mine? What if I don't have to own it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that piece of like, what if this doesn't mean what I think it means? Usually the first, sometimes subconscious belief in there is that, well, if I feel it, that it's mine. And we come to find out, like, we're just so connected to so much more than anything we could ever imagine or understand. You're feeling me right now. I'm feeling you in so many different ways, beyond and beyond. Our mind often thinks it's, if I feel it, that it's mine. Just starting to question that can
Mm-hmm.
really open up some space for people. Be like, wow, all of the things that I thought that were mine, and I was like, 99% of them were not. And
Yeah.
so one of the ways it's like, oh yeah, right, is this mine? It's like, doesn't feel like it. And there's usually like this relief, because all of a sudden it's like we're already engaging with it in a different way.
Yeah,
So
it's been hard for me to articulate, going back to earlier when we were chatting about our challenges are our biggest lessons. My relationship with my dad has been one of the greatest lessons of my life, to be quite honest. And I'm very grateful that he and I got our relationship right before he passed. We were in a better place than we'd ever been in our entire life for a couple of years. So we had a couple of really good, solid years. And so then after he passed, of course, then there's this whole other flood of other, I don't want to say regret, but things, I wish I would have done this differently. Why did we waste so much time? And, I actually did a solo trip. That was the start of my solo trip. So again, I say the gifts that came from that is I went inward on myself, like, what do I need to do? Because I felt like I was carrying a suitcase of emotions still.
mm,
I went to Florida for 4 days, 5 days. I can't remember exactly. First solo trip I'd ever really taken that wasn't work. I travel a ton for work solo, but this was, I'm going to go check out. I went to the beach because it felt grounding to me to be near the salt and the earth and the water. And I spent 4 days, Zach, in a hotel, just crying, sitting with myself, feeling the emotions, talking to myself, talking to my dad. I mean, just if anybody would have had a GoPro or like a video, it would have been lunacy, right? But it was the most therapeutic gift I ever gave myself. For 2 days, I don't even think I went out. I ordered room service. I journaled. I sat on the balcony. I listened to some frequencies and some music to help invoke an emotion. Like, I wanted to just pour it out. I went down to the beach. I laid on the beach and just cried and just sat there and just was totally still with myself for those 4 or 5 days. I'd never done anything like that. Never. And so that was an epic and amazing experience and a gift that I gave myself. I came home feeling like 20 pounds lighter, like I had just set down something. So to your point, I thought that I had to own that anger and that I needed to carry it around forever. I didn't. I set it down on a beach in Florida, and it's gave it back to the universe, back to the wind. And it feels amazing. And so every year I actually do solo trips now, not to that level, of course, but it really opened up a whole realm of sitting with your feelings and sitting and being present with that. So my relationship with my dad is probably one of the greatest gifts of my life. And I wake up every day grateful for the time that we had. And I feel closer to him now, actually, to some degree, because I understand how energy works and we chat and he's one of my guides for sure. But Sedona, I know you've got a retreat in Sedona. Sedona is one of my favorite solo trip places that I go to. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your retreats and what you do and how you help people guide and work through some of this process.
Yeah, everyone is different. So they are created by the people that show up. And I don't have too much of a game plan. I show up and I'm like, let's see where we're going today. We do some breath work. One of my favorites is like, there's this magic about doing it together. So one of the reasons that trauma or things can get trapped or held onto our system is like where we feel isolated or alone in them. You know, somebody goes through this some horrific experience and they felt very like alienated from the world or separate, or this was just mine. And it's almost like whatever we do when we do that, when we really like own it as mine, it just really locks it in place. And so there's this magic that when we get to come together in a group and do it together, it's like things can move so easy and the connection is actually real. Like to pretend that we could ever be separate and alone that's the illusion. But we get to go through these things together and it's really funny. It's like, you know, we human beings were very unique in our own ways and we're all exactly the same too. Right. So
I know, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You get together in a group and it's like, wow, we're all the oneness. Like we all have different houses that we go back to, but we really are so wildly similar.
Yeah. You have something that you're shameful for that you don't think anybody else knows about or should know. It's like everyone's got that. There's like this energetic thing that we do when we're trying to not be seen, when we're trying to like keep these things to ourselves. And it's kind of like unnatural with our soul. And so it has us going in the opposite direction of where we want to go. And so, I mean, I have this question for myself, like, how much more can I open today? How much more can I open right now in these different things? And again, that's, you know, for a long time, that was a lot easier to do when I'm by myself or when I'm in the forest with a tree. It's easy to be open and vulnerable there. It's like, oh, you put another person there and it's like, okay, there is so much magic in that. So that's one thing. I mean, we do breath work. We'll usually have some processes and I often start them with like, if you could get anything out of being here this week, what do you want to get from it? And that speaks to usually the thing that's driving us the most crazy in our life right now, which is usually the place that we're most at resistance to right now. And that's the place of resistance where I'm going to find so much of myself. In that resistance is where I'm going to find all my freedom.
Well, I feel like one of your retreats is on my list in the very near future. I think that'd be fun. Where can people find you? I know that you do Sedona retreats. I see Las Vegas retreats. Any other locations? How do you pick your locations? What's special about them? Well, I know what's special about Sedona for the most part.
Yeah.
Most people do, but
yeah, I do my longer retreats have been in Sedona since I moved here almost 8 years ago. And then I do events, mostly Western US, but I'm also in this period of time where I'm like, wow, it feels like everything is changing. So I think a little less travel is on my calendar for this year. A little more home time with my sauna.
Yeah, there you go. I'm kind of in a grounded energy myself right now. Like I said, last year was an interesting year of learning and lessons and getting clear on vision. You know, Mark and I, no joke, like my Homestead Heal is definitely not just a thing that I am wildly passionate about teaching other people. I love having the things that I want all under one roof. So it's like I'm living a day at the spa every day, all day. So why would I need a vacation from that, really? You know, but I travel for work and I attend different events and then also retreats for myself. But yeah, I feel that too. It feels like it's a year of a little bit more grounded energy. If people want to find you, work with you, where are the best places to find and connect and follow with you?
My website is zachrehder.com or breathwork.events is an easy way to get there. That's easier than spelling my last name. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am so appreciative of you. Thank you so much for giving us such an insight. I really love the analogies and the mindfulness that you kind of pointed out and showed us how to feel into some things. So I appreciate your time and energy on that. And we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Yeah, thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Okay, friends and fellow wellness warriors, thanks for tuning in today. If this show was helpful and inspired you, please head over to Apple or Spotify to rate, review, subscribe, and follow us, as well as share it with your friends and family. It's a fantastic way to grow the show, expand my reach, and teach others how to create a vibrant life they love. If you're ready to invest in your health and purchase a Clear Light Sauna, hop on over to jenhellerlifestyle.com and send me a note. Thanks again for tuning in. I love you. I'm grateful for you. And I thank you so much for your support. You are the reason I do this work. You are the reason I do this show. And you are the reason I get up every single day with a burning desire in my soul. Cheers to your health and happiness, my friends. We'll see you next week. This podcast is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you think you have a medical condition, consult your licensed physician.